Jai Anilo Premadano Paramakacho Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Chaksu Ramanatam Jaina Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha
Si Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Jina Bhutale Swainam Rupadanayam Dadanti Sapam Dantikam Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 9, Text 40. Jivai Kato Chuta Vikarshati Mavitita Sishno Anyata Svakutaram Shavanam Kutasya Rano Anyata Chapaladre Macha Karma Shaktir Bhavya Sapatnya Vigeha Patim Runanti Jivai Kato Chita Vikarshati Mavitifta Shishnam Titas Tvakudaram Shravanam Kutasche Granam Nitas Paladrik Vakacha Karma Shaktir Bhavya Sapatnya Ivake Apatim Runanti Jivai Kato Chita Vikarshati Mavachitta Namitastvataram Shavanam Kutasche Karma Shakti To one side, Achyuta. O my infallible Lord, Vikarshati, attracts, Ma, me, Avitripta, not being satisfied, Shishna, genitals, Anyata, to another side, Tvak, the skin for touching a soft thing, Udara, the belly for various types of food, Shravanam, the ear for hearing some sweet music, Kutas some other side, Vahana, the nose for smelling, Anyata, still another side, Chapaladrik, restless eyesight, Vacha, somewhere, Karma Shakti, the active senses, Bhaktiha, many, Sapatnina, co-wives, Iva, life, Geha Patim, householder, Nanti, annihilate. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. My dear Lord, O infallible one, my position is like that of a person who has many wives, all trying to attract him in their own way. For example, the tongue is attracted to palatable dishes, the genitals to sex with an attractive woman, and the sense of touch to contact with soft things. The belly, although filled, still wants to eat more, and the ear, not attempting to hear about you, is generally attracted to cinema songs. The sense of smell is attracted to yet another side. The restless eyes are attracted to scenes of sense gratification, and the active senses are attracted elsewhere. In this way, I am certainly embarrassed. Purport. The human form of life is meant for God realization, but this process, which begins with Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, hearing and chanting of the holy name of the Lord, is disturbed as long as our senses are materially attracted. Therefore, devotional service means purifying the senses. In the conditioned state, our senses are covered by material sense gratification, and as long as one is not trained in purifying the senses, one cannot become a devotee. In our Krishna Consciousness movement, therefore, we advise from the very beginning that one restrict the activities of the senses, especially the tongue, which is described by Srila Bhaktivedanta Thakur as most greedy and unconquerable. To stop this attraction of the tongue, one is authoritatively advised not to accept meat or similar unedible things, nor to allow the tongue to hanker to drink or smoke. Even the drinking of tea and coffee is not permitted. Similarly, the genitals must be restricted from illicit sex. Without such restraint of the senses, one cannot make advancement in Krishna consciousness. The only method for controlling the senses is to chant and hear the holy name of the Lord. Otherwise, one will always be disturbed. As a householder with more than one wife, the only method of controlling the senses is to chant and hear the holy name of the Lord. Otherwise, one will always be disturbed, as a householder with more than one wife would be disturbed by them with sense gratification. Maharaj has offered a prayer which reminds us of Upadeshamrita, Vacha Vegam, Manash Krodha Vegam, Jiva Vegam, Prabhupashta Vegam, Nitan Vegam, Yogas, Itadira, Sakam, Abhiman, Kritigim, Sashishyat. We have spoken on that verse a number of times. Describing how the senses victimize the conditioned soul and drag him hither and thither for the purpose of sense enjoyment. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, the first principle which is taught is how to control the senses. After explaining the distinction between the body, which is a field of enjoyment, and the owner of that, or the proprietor or enjoyer of that field. That is to say, after describing the difference between the body and the soul, then Lord Krishna quickly tells Arjuna that you have to control the senses. You have to bring them back from wherever they are going, as a tortoise withdraws its limbs within its shell. This is the practice of yoga, to be done with determination. And we have ample need to practice in this way, ample opportunity to practice in this way, and need at every moment of the day. There are so many allurements And in fact, these allurements will always be there. Because Maya's kingdom, her whole material kingdom, is made up of the material elements, consisting of the senses, the knowledge-acquiring senses, the active senses, and their sense objects. So in every moment there is a chance for sense gratification. But human life is something more important than simply to be like an animal. In fact, the animals we see have better opportunity in certain respects. Each and every animal has some particular sense which is very active and more capable than the humans. And if we study, we will see, however, that the animals become trapped by the very sense which is particularly strong in them. Just like a fish has a very strong sense of taste, very strong. But that is the way in which a fish is trapped. A fish becomes trapped by being allured on the hook of a fisherman. Or we can say a fish has very active eyes. Again, he looks for the bait, so he becomes allured in this way. The hunters trap animals, just like the deer. The hunters play a song, and by making or singing a song or playing a song, the deers actually become trapped in this way, and they get caught just because of the sense of hearing. They have a very sharp sense of hearing. Elephants are very powerful, and we see that one male elephant may have many female elephants. So because of the desire for sex life on the part of the elephant, very powerful genitals, so they make a trap for the female elephant, for the male elephant, by keeping a female elephant tied up, and next to it they dig a deep pit. And so when the male elephant rushes there, then he falls into the pit. So in this way we see that all of the different beasts and species, they may be very powerful with a particular sense activity, but that sense activity is actually the cause of their condition. Now, what is the situation of the human beings? Human beings are blessed with active, sharp senses, all senses. All of their senses are quite good. They have a fairly decent sense of smell, of sight, of touch, of taste, and as a result, the human being can become more entangled practically in sense gratification than any other living entity. And so we see that today, the present society of human beings, they're more entangled in sense gratification than any animal could be. The animals have a season for sex life. The human beings have sex life all the time, in all seasons. The animals eat only a certain allotted amount of food. Human beings will overeat. You see, to the point of illness. I was watching one man yesterday, and he got out of the truck. What was it? Oh, at the bank. I was walking. Got out of it. Did you understand him? Very heavy set man. He couldn't, and it looked like there was something wrong with his leg. He was limping, but actually I could understand. He was so overweight that it was causing him to limp. And he was like carrying an extra 150 pounds constantly. He gradually went to favors one leg and begins to limp. So, and in each case, whatever we see, the eyes, the nose, the tongue, people are trying to gratify their tongue. The habits of smoking, for example, all of these things are simply causing people hardships in various ways. So that today's society and human beings are more addicted to sense gratification than ever before. And the result is that they cannot practice austerity, they cannot practice sense control, and their minds are degraded, debased, they cannot remember Krishna, and so they have to suffer repeatedly in birth and death, birth and death. So, the system of Krishna consciousness, of course, is to replace each one of the material sense objects with spiritual sense objects. This is the advantage of Krishna consciousness. This is the advantage of living in a community of devotees. There's so much opportunity to just even, for example, to see the devotee. Someone was saying it's so nice to come back and to look at your neighbors and see that your neighbors are devotees. Otherwise you have to hear so many horrible things coming out of the neighbors' houses, smell so many horrible things, and all the other degraded activities that the karma is engaging. So in Krishna consciousness we get this opportunity for purifying the senses. Each and every sense has its way of becoming purified, and this is yoga. Rishikesha Rishikenam Sevanam Bhakti Uchate. This is Bhakti yoga, to engage all of our senses in the service of Krishna. So we have to practice in this way, and according to how successful we are at this practice, that will determine our happiness. Because at the present moment we are not very happy. Why? Why are we not happy? Because we are not remembering Krishna. When we remember Krishna, certainly we can become happy. Just like we see the residents of Vrindavan, they're always remembering Krishna. When Radharani moves here and there, she always remembers Krishna. She sees the bees hovering over the water, and she immediately thinks of Krishna's curly hair, which resembles so many clusters of bees. And similarly, when Krishna sees something, champak flowers, for example, he remembers Srimati Radharani. When he sees a golden vine or a lightning strike, he remembers her. He sees the color of a flowing river which looks golden, and he thinks this must be her, but no, it may not be her because it is stationary and she is always moving. Their senses are very much engaged, the divine couple, Sri Sri Radha and Krishna, but their purpose is always in seeing each other. Radharani hears the sound of Krishna's flute. That is what she wants to use her ears for. Not to hear any mundane sound, but she's always trying to perceive the sound of Krishna's flute playing. And so her ears are like cups. They're described to be like cups. Her eyes are like cups, catching the beauty, the beautiful nectar of Krishna's form. And her ears are like cups, which are drinking in the sound of Krishna's flute playing. And her mind is always engaged in thinking in so many ways of Krishna. Her feet, her body is moving very slowly. Sometimes she complains that the stones are pricking my feet. And Lalita, her friend who is walking with her, say, no, it is not the stones, because you always walk on this path. But it is like the heavy black stone which is lying in your heart. That is what is making you move so slowly. And this way, the friends of Radharani are always teasing her. Her eyes, her tongue wants to taste the prasad of Krishna. It's like we want to make sure that whatever foodstuffs we eat are offered to Krishna first. Radharani will not eat any food which is not offered to Krishna. Not only that, she won't eat any food which Krishna has not tasted. And therefore, her friends have to very tactfully find a way to get some remnants from Krishna's, not only remnants from his plate, but things which Krishna has actually had in his mouth. Sometimes Krishna will chew, and knowing very well what Radharani's desire is, he will make a face that this particular food which I'm eating is very unpalatable, and he'll spit it out. And that part that he has spit out is very carefully collected by the gopis like Danishka who serve in Yasoda's home. And then when Radharani sits down to take prasadam, some of that food which Krishna has had in his mouth will be mixed inside the food that she's eating. And then she'll know the taste. Similarly, the whole forest becomes fragrant. When Radharani walks through, Krishna is looking. And sometimes he will hear the sound of leaves dropping and he'll think, now Radharani is coming. But then it won't be Radharani. So he's always listening. He's always waiting to smell the fragrance of Radharani's form, which comes up in the forest as she enters the forest to meet him. So they're engaged in this way. Their senses are engaged in this way. And they're very clever. Their minds are also engaged in so many pastimes. Just like the pastime of collecting the toll Govardhan, because Vasudeva has engaged one Brahmin or some Brahmins to perform a yajna for Baladev at Govindakund, which is a lake on Govardhan. And the Brahmins tell Radharani and the gopis that if you give ghee for this sacrifice, then whatever your desires are will be fulfilled. So the Radharani and the gopis think we have only one desire, and that is to meet Krishna. So let us bring ghee to these Brahmins at Govindakund. And Krishna has a parrot, Vichakshana. So these parrots are very, very clever. Radharani has her parrot, Sukshmana, and Vichakshana is a parrot of Krishna. And they're always finding out what the other is doing. They are messengers. And they inform the divine couple of what the other is doing. So Krishna heard from his parrot that Radharani is going to bring ghee to the Brahmins at Govindakund. So immediately Krishna went on the top of Govardhan along with Subal and Madhumangal, and they erected a toll station. And the gopis, actually, they knew that Krishna would come there, so they were moving very slowly, looking for Krishna, and then they caught sight of Krishna. And Radharani was thinking how beautiful Krishna looks. We have never seen him looking so beautiful. And then she heard the sound of his flute, and she was saying that if only in the next life we could take birth as bamboos, because then we could also taste the nectar of Krishna's flute playing, the lips of Krishna. You can read how nicely the gopis are speaking about the flute in the Srimad Bhagavatam 10th canto, the Venu Gita is called, the song of the flute, describing how the flute attracts the gopis, and in Chaitanya Chaitamrita, many verses describing the feelings of the gopis, enviously describing the fortune of the flute for always being able to drink the nectar of Krishna's lips. So when they see like this the beauty of Krishna and hear his flute playing, they move very, very slowly, as if enchanted by that sound, and gradually they come past the toll place, and they don't even look. They don't even look at Krishna. And Krishna jumps out and stops them and says, "What are you doing? Don't you see that there's a tax that you have to pay here?" And they said, "We never had to pay any tax before. We're simply walking around Govardhan, going to Govindakund." And Radharani won't even speak. She doesn't even speak. She just stands there with a very angry look. It is described Kilat Kinchita. In Nectar Devotion, this emotion is described by Srimati Radharani, where she's very, very angry and haughty, and she won't speak a word. So Krishna says, no, there is a tax. And what is the tax for? The gopis ask. He says that we are taxing the beauty of all young ladies who are here. You have to pay a tax because you have too much beauty. So you have to pay for this tax. I said, we have never heard of a tax like this. He said, furthermore, you have to pay a tax for your youthfulness. So in this way, Krishna was demanding one reason after another, adding up all the figures of how many taxes they had to pay. So these pastimes, very nicely described by Srila Rupa Goswami and Raghunath Das Goswami, Danakeli Komodi and Danakeli Chintamani. Each one of them has written describing this pastime. And in this way, the divine couple are answering back and forth. Radharani finally said that you are like, Krishna said that I am a snake and I will take what I want. And she said, I am like a female mongoose, and the mongoose never afraid of the snake. In fact, the snake is always afraid of the mongoose because it's the one animal that can easily kill a snake. So many words, tricky words, they use their mind in this way to speak to each other. And all the gopis, as well as Radha and Krishna, are deriving so much pleasure. So these emotions, using the senses for the pleasure of Krishna and Radharani, that is what we mean by Krishna consciousness. That is actual bhakti yoga. So, it is not possible to control the senses by artificial means. That is already proved to be a failure by the examples of Bhari Muni and so many other Vishishta Muni, different great sages who were much more powerful than we could ever hope to be. And they were all brought down by the allurement of sense objects. So, to try to mechanically control the senses is a failure. To try to simply remind ourselves is something better. We can try to remind ourselves throughout the day. Yes, let me remember I should use my senses in the service of Krishna. But the best way to control the senses is to always hear, chant, and remember the pastimes of Krishna. If we hear, chant, and remember the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then automatically our minds will be purified. The mind is the king of all the senses. It is the center of the senses. So if the mind is not degraded, then the senses will also not become degraded. And just like we see in Bhagavad Gita, the senses are said to be just like horses, and the mind is like the reins which control the horses. So if the mind is fixed on remembrance of Krishna through the hearing and chanting of the pastimes of the Lord and the glories of the Lord, then a person will become purified. He will never allow his senses to be misused. And just like we were mentioning yesterday, that when a devotee will know, just like the gopis know, that my body belongs to Radha Krishna. It doesn't belong to anyone else. It cannot be used for anything else or anyone else. And they will never permit it to be used. This is the sign of advancement in spiritual life. That you have already given. Just like Sanatana Goswami wanted to commit suicide. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, you can't do that. Because your body doesn't belong to you. You have already surrendered to it. So there's no question of you trying to take or misuse what doesn't belong to you. So, if our mind, if we have dedicated our mind, our heart and soul to the service of Radha and Krishna, if actually we understand that there is no other identity that I have than to be the eternal servant of the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna, the master of the gopis. If we have given ourselves over to Radha and Krishna within our minds, and if our minds are always engaged in remembering their pastimes, then it will be possible to control the senses in the mind. Then it will actually be, because there will be a higher taste. Param Krishna and Bhakti. These things will give a higher taste. Otherwise, simply, why is it that mechanically controlling the senses doesn't work? Because there's no higher taste. It's simply trying to it's a negative principle. Oh, this is not good, I shouldn't do it. But negative is not satisfying. Simply to remind us this is not good. That is, how long can you do that? But if you have something which is so much better, then it becomes very easy. So what is the best of all things? The best of all things is to hear, to remember the pastimes of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. This is the path recommended by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates. So Prahlad Maharaj is always absorbed in the pastimes of the Lord. He is the perfect example, right, of what? Remembrance. And he's following this principle perfectly. And because of that, never disturbed under any circumstance. One who is always remembering Krishna under all conditions is never disturbed under any circumstance. And how do we remember? By hearing and chanting. By hearing. Shravanam, Kirtanam leads to Smaranam. So, the process is there. We have to take it. The literatures have been given. We have to read them. And if we don't take the time to read these literatures, if we don't practice remembering these pastimes, then it is only out of duty that we follow. And duty is a strong motivating factor, but sometimes one is not very dutiful in the Kali Yuga. So there should be a mixture of duty and taste. Taste is very important, because we have all been trained to be first-class sense enjoyers. Our parents, our teachers, and society at large has taught us that we should always be the number one enjoyer. And it has been drummed into us for such a long time. You are the topmost enjoyer. Your life is meant for enjoyment. We are all quite convinced at this point. So since we are convinced at this point, then we had best, dovetail that wrong conception for a proper purpose. All right, I will be the topmost enjoyer. I will be the topmost relisher. I will find out that enjoyment, that object which is the best, which will furnish me the greatest enjoyment. Now, that object has been analyzed to be the service of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna himself, certifies that there is no higher enjoyment than that of Radharani and the Gopis. They are doing better even than he. And in order to taste their higher degree of enjoyment, he had to take their mood. So of all the devotees certainly are the best enjoyers. The karmis cannot enjoy. Not unless you think that, the kind of things that they do are enjoyable. If one thinks of stuffing one's face with meat and alcohol, or lying and having illicit sex, and all of these other degraded activities are enjoyment, well, that is one thing. But if one has enough sense to see that such activities lead to suffering more and more, then certainly we agree that devotees enjoy the best. And amongst the devotees, we see that by degree, those who are servants enjoy more than those who are simply in Shantaras. And those who are in friendship, they experience even greater satisfaction. And those who have parental love are even more intensely absorbed in their memory. And of all, the gopis are the best. So, therefore, if you are convinced that your business in life is to enjoy, if you are a dedicated sense enjoyer, addicted to sense gratification, then Krishna consciousness is certainly for you. Because we have the highest object on which to fix our senses, and that is the beautiful, transcendental, youthful couple, Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. And how do we do it? By using our senses in their service. By seeing them, by serving them in various ways, hearing of their glories, tasting the remnants of their food. All our senses should be focused on them. Then there will be samadhi. Then you will have Krishna consciousness, and it will be natural to serve Krishna. You will not have to force yourself. You will not have to feel any tension in your mind, wondering, who am I? You see. You will not go through any type of crisis, but rather you will be very easily able to surrender your life in their service. So we will stop here and ask if anyone has any questions or comments. Yes, good job.
I can understand what Prabhupada is saying about cinema songs. Someone may question how is it that they have cinema songs with natural.
Yes. When they may not have had cinema songs of the type where there may not have been, the type of movie theaters we're thinking of, but they had degraded types of singing, entertainment, songs of lusty songs for entertainment. So Prabhupada has put it in the modern language. Although nowadays it is going back to that, just like they have opened that restaurant called Medieval Times. Undoubtedly they must be sitting there, right? They probably have long tables and they sit there with big hunks of meat and jugglers come and some, bards come and others come playing. All lusty types of singing is going on. So they're going back to the medieval times. And then when someone will open up, Roman times, and then what will be before that? Caveman times. And then, so, certainly it is a sign of the times that they're going backwards. They're regressing, not progressing, not satisfied. It's not degraded enough. Anyway, Prabhupada has given very nice language here in his way of translating the Bhaktivedanta purpose to bring home the message. Prabhupada said we should present the philosophy in our own words, but it is not wrong because it is guided by Guru Sat and Shastra Sat. No, not that we necessarily take it literally. That when Kalamara says cinema songs, that this is the proof that there were movie theaters during the time of Lord Nishinga's appearance. But in any case, they had the ability to see pictures in a moving way, so to speak. Their imaginations were more active. They could see a fixed, still shot and go on with it just like we can do, right? We can see a painting in our books, and looking at that painting and hearing the pastime, we can imagine the whole thing that takes place. Another question? Yes,
It's just, I've been noticing that these conversations between Krishna and the gopis are very intricate and involved, how they say different things to try and create a movement. And it seems that we're just totally unfamiliar with that kind of speaking and talking in Western society. So is that,
the question was that it seems like the conversations of the gopis are very intricate and very different than the conversations that go on in Western society. You mean to say in so many ways, I suppose, so many ways. So how do we become familiar with that language? It is like any other language, it has to be studied. We have to study it scientifically, and that is why Srila Rupa Goswami has written Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Nectar Devotion. If one studies nectar devotion very carefully, then one will have a very proper foundation for appreciating the conversations of Krishna and the gopis. It is all there, especially not only nectar devotion, but the book that Rupa Goswami wrote 2 books of this for this purpose. One was Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and the other was Ujjvala Nilamani. Ujjvala Nilamani describes Shringara Ras, conjugal mood. So that mood is given only a little bit in nectar devotion. And because it is so elaborate that he dedicated an entire book simply to describing Shringara Ras. So, but in any case, even reading nectar devotion, one will have a very good preparation. It is written in a very systematic way. It doesn't, sometimes devotees don't understand the system of that book, and they don't become confused, but they just read it like many pastimes, interesting talks. But actually, it's not written that way. Rather, each one of the quotes which is given to prove or to demonstrate a particular aspect of bhakti. And so with some guidance. Therefore we are teaching, I think that Dana Maharaj may teach this time, Nectar Devotion Part 2 in Vrindavan. So if you get copies of this class, you'll get the idea. Also in this book I've written Brahma Samhita that ever gets published. I've also summarized the Nectar Devotion in 1 chapter and described how the whole book is meant as a textbook. But that book is actually suited for training us to understand the conversations and to derive satisfaction from reading. Then if you understood the science properly, then you read Krishna book, for example, or 10th Canto Bhagavatam, which is Krishna book. You'll get so much more out of the conversation because you'll understand exactly what's going on. When it says that, Yasoda became stunned upon seeing the Krishna being taken up by the Trinaparta demon. That, all of these are indications of different loving ecstasies. So there's a way to scientifically understand all of these things. And it helps. Ultimately, we don't care what the technical terminology is. We want to relish. But in order to qualify to relish, to learn the science is helpful. Otherwise, if one does not take that trouble to learn it in a scientific way, then simply hearing these things, we will not take them properly. We will take them cheaply and we will massage you. So first we should study them, and after learning everything, then we should forget it all. First learn it, master it, and then forget it. Forget it means don't think of it that way, but think of it simply from the point of view of relishing. And that will happen. Just like when you first learn to drive a car, you learn you have to turn the ignition, and then you have to press the right gas pedal. I hardly remember anymore. Press the gas pedal, right? And then what do you do? Huh? Then you I don't even remember anymore. But anyway, those who know how to drive know you do one thing, and then, you can drive. But after a while, you don't even think of these things, right? You just get in and you use the car to take you where you want to go. So when a devotee becomes experienced in the science of bhakti, then it doesn't have to make analysis in this way, but simply relishes.